And that jarring cacophony tells you you're back listening to the Power of Three podcast. And this is the week where Doctor Who Season 13 is released on Blu-ray. So, to tie in with it, we're bringing you a novel from that period. Well, technically somewhere in between, because today we are looking at System Shock by Julian Richards. And the back cover tells us that the story is set between the Seeds of Doom and the Masque of Mandragora. So, let's just take it as Season 13, shall we? Just for the sake of completedness. I'm Kenny Smith. So yes, System Shock. It was, according to TARDIS Fandom, the 11th novel in the Virgin Missing Adventures series. It was published on the 15th of June 1995, a day before my sister's 19th birthday, with a cover illustration by Martin Roll of DSM Print and Design Partnership, according to the inside text. It was written by Julian Richards, and featured the Fourth Doctor, Sarah Jane Smith and Harry Sullivan. And this novel was one of only 2 novels in the series to feature Harry, the other being A Device of Death, which of course we've previously featured on this podcast when we spoke to the author Christopher Bullis. Now, this story of course made a little bit of news in its own right when it was featured in Doctor Who magazine, because the book's existence was revealed in issue 223, and it noted Martin Roll's cover for System Shock is pictured right. In keeping with the high technology theme of the book, the artwork was created entirely on computer. Now, I have messaged Martin to see if he'd like to come on, but sadly he declined the opportunity. He does some incredible work and he makes some incredible replicas of Jaws. Yes, the shark, not from James Bond. And yes, he's a leading expert and authority on that and making replicas of the shark, which was known as Bruce, for those of you who are interested. Are you called Bruce? If so, write in, let us know. Email at theearth2podcast@gmail.com and Peter will not bother passing it on. So, what else can we tell you about this book? Well, let's look at the cover now that we've talked about it. As you can see, there's a picture of the Fourth Doctor, looking very grim and sombre there and looking straight into her eyes. There is a Sarah Jane Smith there wearing a white blouse and wearing a leather skirt, carrying a machine gun. It's a variation of a picture from Pyramids of Mars. And there, in the main part of the image, we can see a compact disc, but there with it, there's also a face. But whose face is that? It's a part human, part lizard face. It reminds me in part of the creatures from V, where you get that sort of face torn away and you can see there's a lizardy bit underneath. So, yeah. But yes, that was created all on computer, of course. It happens so often these days, people using their iPads and all these other gadgets. But yeah, at the time this was very much revolutionary, and I remember it being discussed in depth at the Glasgow Doctor Who group, just how you could do that. So, that's the front cover. Let's now have a look at the back cover and see what the blurb has to tell us.
We're dicing with death on the information superhighway to hell. A rebellion on another planet. A kidnapping in central London. The head of MI5 assassinated. A hostage siege suddenly and violently ended by the SAS. A computer CD slipped into the Fourth Doctor's pocket by a dead man. It's 1998, and the global information superhighway is about to come online. Offnet controls everything digital, from cars to sliding doors, from interactive television to military command and control systems. The Doctor and Sarah must join forces with an old friend in a race against time to prevent the breakdown of technological society and foil an unconventional alien takeover bid.
There we go. Now, the eagle-eared amongst you may have noticed that that wasn't my voice. And of course, if you're a regular listener to The Power of Three, you will know that when it comes to accents, I'm rubbish at doing them. So, I decided that it would be fun to get a friend to do it. So that, of course, was Christopher Naylor reading it out for you. And of course, you may recognise his name because he plays Harry Sullivan, for Big Finish. So a massive thanks to Chris for taking time out of a Saturday afternoon to record that for us. Now, as we have a look at the start of this novel, we note that the author Julian Richards pays tribute to some of his work colleagues. He says, "Many thanks to Peter Angelidis, Craig Hinton and Andy Lane for their comments and help. Also to Martin Roll for the excellent cover and for improving my sketch mark of Hubway. Both pieces of artwork entirely achieved appropriately enough on computer." Now, I sent a quick message to Peter to see if he could clarify what help he had given, and he said, 30 years on, I'm not sure I can remember what help I provided. I'd have read through the manuscript and offered comments, but I don't recall providing any plot or character input. I think Justin was still working at IBM when he wrote it. I had moved south to a different IBM location. It's of its era, isn't it? Published in 1995, set in the near future of 1998, with the cover showing the latest popular method of storing computer programs and data, a CD. So big thanks to Peter for taking the time to do that, particularly as he's been unwell lately, so huge thanks for fighting back the COVID and sharing that with us. Now, before we continue, let's have our first reading from System Shock, and this is courtesy of our friend Craig Brawley, who recorded this for us. Huge thanks, Craig.
Sarah looked round the room, hoping to find something of interest or a clue as to why they were there, but she was disappointed. They heard footsteps from along the corridor, and Ashby stood more self-consciously upright. He stepped aside for a man to enter the room, a tall man in his mid-30s with strikingly fair hair. He was wearing a suit, but looked comfortable rather than smart in it. His tie, like his suit, was plain and dark. He dismissed Ashby with a nod of the head and took a seat opposite the Doctor and Sarah, laying a manila folder on the table in front of him. He squared up the folder against the edge of the table, then folded his hands on top of it. "I do apologise for the inconvenience," he said in a well-cultured voice, "but one of my people was killed this evening, and I need to ask you a few questions." "The man we saw?" suggested Sarah. The Doctor's eyes narrowed. Thin man with a thin beard, neck crushed outside a building site. The fair-haired man frowned. "I thought Special Branch picked you up outside I-squared, not at the scene of the crime." "They did, but perhaps they confused cause and effect." "I'm sorry?" "We were at the office because we saw the murder, or at least the victim, not vice versa." The man considered this a while. "You didn't kill him?" It was an observation, rather than a question. "No!" Sarah was emphatic. "But we know who did. It was a woman. We followed her to the office building, I-squared or whatever you said." "Are you intending to continue in this singularly interrogatory vein?" the Doctor inquired. "Or shall we introduce ourselves and have tea?" The man lifted the phone and muttered into it. Then he smiled. "Tea is on the way." "Good. In that case, I'm the Doctor, and this is Miss Smith. Robert Gibson, MI5. The Doctor nodded. "Then you will have heard of UNIT." "Indeed. May I ask how you come to have heard of it?" "Oh, I've done some work with them on occasion. Freelance sort of thing. Consultancy." "You mean wet jobs?" The Doctor grimaced. "I mean advice." Gibson did not look convinced. "I wouldn't have thought you were the UNIT type, to be frank. Can you prove it?" Sarah sighed and watched as the Doctor mentioned passes he could not immediately put his hands on, and which might perhaps be out of date. He also dropped names of people Gibson had either not heard of or who had retired years earlier. Eventually Gibson suggested they drop the subject, hinting that he could check the Doctor's credentials later. Then he made another muttered phone call. "Right then," Gibson said at last. "Shall we compare notes on this evening's events? It seems you can fill in a few blanks we have." "Tell us first why you were watching I-squared, the Doctor challenged. "Very well." "We suspect that it's a front of some sort for the Little Brothers." "You mean like Big Brother?" Sarah asked. "Yes, Miss Smith." Gibson seemed surprised she had to ask. "A terrorist group, opposed to all forms of government intervention or regulation. Big Brother, in their terms." They were behind the Pullen Tower thing, which came to its conclusion this evening. If you mean the tower block we saw being stormed, I'd say it came to a rather loud and bloody conclusion, Sarah said. But why would I² be behind them? Who are they anyway? You are out of touch, aren't you? The doctor leaned across the table. We've been travelling, he said quietly. Tell us about it. So Gibson told them. It's run by Lionel Stabfield. You must have heard of him. Rumoured to be the 5th richest man in the world. Only 43 as well. He came from nowhere and set up I². The press alternately call him a genius and a bore. His competitors keep their thoughts largely to themselves, except Ashley Chappell, and he's big enough in his own right not to be scared. And what does this Stabfield character do? The doctor asked. He owns and runs I², and that means OffNet, the office automation stuff. It connects office equipment together. Integrated intelligence, that's what the two I's stand for. Gibson shuffled the papers in his folder for a moment, then he continued. The initial appeal was that I² had no stake in the technology. It was a truly independent standard. After the de facto standards Microsoft and the others were rolling out, this was a breath of fresh air. Companies leapt at it. Then I² got into the business properly, the doctor asked. Gibson nodded. They started producing their own chips, either complete systems or daughter chips to go into other systems. The OffNet protocols were built in. Instead of licensing the underlying language, Varel, you had to buy the chips. So they got rich and gained control. Yes, and it hasn't stopped with OffNet. The Varel language is now used by motor components to talk to each other and divulge their service information, diagnostics and history. CarNet. It's used to control lifts in office blocks, so they pick up and drop off people more efficiently. It's used to schedule the trains and the tubes and the buses in just about every country in the world. Big then. Sarah was impressed. Very. It will even keep your stereos sounding perfect. In fact, this evening was a first for them in several ways. The SAS used BattleNet to coordinate their attack. It suggests the optimum attack plan, then keeps them in constant communication and provides status information in a special head-up display within their respirators. Very effective, as it turns out. All this in just the last few years? Sarah mentally worked out the maximum time it could have taken. This is just the beginning, Gibson said. The phone rang, and he cupped his hand over the mouthpiece as he completed his observation. When the information superhighway comes online in a few days, OffNet will be the glue that keeps all the disparate systems working together. So what does it all mean? Sarah asked quietly as Gibson spoke into the phone. Doctor, what's going on? But before the doctor could answer, Gibson stood up. Right, now we can perhaps get some information from you. My boss is on his way up. Nice chap, is he? The doctor asked. Very. But rather more to the point, he may know if you really do have connections with the unit. The door swung open behind Gibson, and a man walked in. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the doctor and Sarah.
Good Lord! I suppose I should have guessed you two would be caught up in this.
Sarah was speechless. She sat staring at the man on the other side of the room, unable to move, gaping. Somehow this movement brought home to her more than any other the fact that she had travelled in time. The doctor was rather more used to the notion, and more importantly the consequences, of time travel. He was on his feet at once, striding towards the newcomer, hand extended. The man was tall. He was in his late 40s, had to be, but looked as if he was still fit and well. He was grey at the temples, his hair thinning a little and receding. His face was lined and slightly softer, rounder. Sarah had seen him only a month ago, yet he was now nearly 20 years older. The doctor grabbed his hand and wrenched it up and down before enfolding him in a bear hug. Harry Sullivan! Now isn't this a pleasant surprise?
A big thanks to Craig for that. And of course there was a little surprise in there which nobody knows about, except the guest voice there. So yes, that's a big thanks once again to our friend Chris Naylor for providing Harry's one line of dialogue, which I thought would be a nice wee surprise. Not even the lovely Craig knows that, so huge thanks. I hope he doesn't mind being subbed by a professional just for one line. So, let's move on and have a look at the book itself. Now, System Shock was first discussed in an interview with Julian Richards, which appeared in issue 221 of Doctor Who magazine, where Craig Hinton spoke to various authors about their books, and he had just spoken to Justin about Theatre of War. So, he was recommissioned, and that was his first missing adventure, which turned out to be System Shock. And let's find out what Justin previewed in DWM. And this is read for us by James Hadwin Bennett. Over to you, James.
Due to the success of Theatre of War, Justin now has a missing adventure due next year. System Shock is rather more straightforward than Theatre of War. One reason is that the missing adventures are supposed to be good old-fashioned yarns. Another is that I had 5 months to write Theatre of War and had already been thinking about it and had some written as part of my initial proposal for Virgin. System Shock's been a 4-month turnaround. And that, together with a full-time job and a full-time family, just isn't enough time for a novel of the same internal complexity. But maybe that's a benefit. I think that System Shock will be more accessible as a result. After that, I've got some plots for novels which need working up. Missing, new and non-Who stuff. Time will tell.
There we go. Huge thanks for that, James. So now, let's have our guest for today's episode, and joining us to discuss System Shock is Julian Richards, Justin's son, who's acknowledged in the credits for this book.
Hello, I am Julian Richards, and I am the son of Julian Richards, who wrote System Shock.
Most certainly did, and you most certainly are. So this is a fantastic book. Do you remember the first time you read it?
I don't. It's slightly strange in that on the stairs leading up to Dad's office are framed versions of the original cover art for a lot of these books, including 2 versions of the System Shock cover art. The one that went out and the original one, where it's very similar, but a decision has clearly been made that the waitress or maid disguise that Sarah is wearing needs to be a bit more serious on the final version than the version that was turned in for the original. But in any case, it means that I've seen the cover of the book a lot, and I can't properly place when I first read it. But I know that I had read it certainly before I left school, so at some point in my teenage years I would have read it for the first time, I reckon.
And it's an absolute gem. Quite incredible. I think this is only your dad's second book.
It is, yes. And among the bits and pieces that I've been able to dig out at this end, I have the various outlines for it. And there are 2 big chunky folders. I thought, okay, we've got multiple copies of the novel in there. No. We've got 4 versions of the outline in there, because the first one is 14 pages long, but the last version is 44 pages long. So the outlines are basically the short story version of the whole novel, which I'd heard Dad talk about occasionally and had never properly put together that they were properly that big. But the earliest of them is dated, and it's the only one that's dated, 22nd of the 6th, 1994, which is less than a year before the novel was published.
Wow.
So he appears to have written the whole thing and got it to Virgin in time for them to turn it around and put it out in 11 months. And again, I knew he wrote fast for them, and he built a reputation for working fast for them, because that's why they asked him to write the Joy Device in an afternoon. But I hadn't, again, properly wrapped my head around, no, this went from 14-page outline to finished novel ready for publication and on the shelves in 11 months.
That's unbelievable. I'm genuinely like, wow, he's good.
Oh, yes.
So what can you tell us about the 14-page starter and how it develops?
So there's a lot of very similar things. The structure of the thing, the narrative, the plot doesn't really change. I'm going to read you the sort of opening page of the outline, the sort of disclaimer at the front of the very first version, just to give you a sense of what the big change is, which says, While unit is mentioned in the synopsis, it is not anticipated that this will necessarily be a unit story. I'm assuming a date of about 1998 for the technology being used and the information superhighway, though it's happening already, of course. It's deliberately left open so that any secret intelligence service can be used, MI5, MI6, CI5, unit, or whoever. Obviously, if unit and some regulars are used, they'll get a bit more focus than indicated in this synopsis. In short, unit is used as a placeholder. And then there are various other notes on bits and pieces. Harry is consistent throughout. Harry's role doesn't change. The Brigadier leads the assault on the house at the end of the initial draft, and then by the second draft, some thought has been had, and it's Bambera.
Nice.
Who is there leading it, and Harry is still working for UNIT, and it's by the two longer drafts, the 40-page and the 44-page, that MI5 come to the fore and UNIT are phased out. But there's definitely versions of the idea where UNIT are more prominent, and there are also versions of the idea where this isn't a Series 13 into Series 14 story. He pitches it as such, and it's quite clearly what he wants to, but again, there's a page of notes that opens with, "This synopsis is written with the Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith in mind, however it could easily be adapted for the Third Doctor with the same companions, or possibly for other combinations, the Second Doctor with Jamie Zoe and Colonel Lethbridge Stewart, the Sixth Doctor Perry and MI5, etc." So there's thought on a willingness to expand it for the roles of the companions within it. Also with a note that says, the Doctor may get rather more focus if the companion turns out to be someone less adept than Sarah Jane. And then in brackets, Dodo or Joe, for example, might have rather more trouble infiltrating a terrorist group. Which I think is fair comment for very different reasons.
Yes, very much so. I'm trying to imagine Dodo. No, it's not working. I cannot see it being Dodo at all.
The version of this with Hartnell dealing with the 1998 vision of computing, while Dodo has to infiltrate the Veracians, is very strange, not least for then imagining Hartnell interacting with Harry Sullivan.
Yeah, yeah, that would be an interesting combination. It's there's one that I've never thought of before. Hartnell and Harry. That would be interesting. But no, I love also just when you're mentioning just sort of all the technology and things like that. It's incredible sort of just seeing how much foresight there's in there. The fact there's a reference early on to flat screen TVs, 24-hour news channels, and as you go on, there's just wee things that are sort of everyday occurrences. The fact that Harry's got his cellular phone with him all the time, and things that we take for granted these days. So there's some lovely foresight in the book.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of it. Dad's first book, Theatre of War, was very much a novelisation of his undergraduate degree. It was dealing with the English and Theatre Studies degree that he'd studied and the way that it affected and engaged with the theory behind a lot of what's going on there. This is very much his job at IBM. This is him taking both the technology and the digital aspects and understandings that he was developing, because it's technology through a specifically corporate lens. It's the vision that the companies had of what technology would look like and how what became the internet would develop, rather than the sort of ground level view of it, which then ties into the other side of it, which is that this is a novel about evil business managers taking over the world, and it's about corporate speak and boardroom engagement and the Veracians as business management software. And it's not until the last outline that becomes their origin. Until then, they are aliens who are good at computers. And it's very late in the day that the shift comes for him to say, no, they're computers. This is how computers think that they're meant to take over the world, by grafting bits of people onto them and trying to think that way, which we add to the list of ideas that are clearly moving around the same sort of circles when we look at things like The Girl in the Fireplace years later, and Deep Breath again after that. That shift in understanding of how technology and organic matter engage with each other.
It's also interesting to know that, as you mentioned there, just with the business speak, you're thinking, this is a few years before The Apprentice kicks off, and it's just like, yeah, very much absolutely mocking that way of speaking and way of thought before it became sort of perhaps more mainstream on TV, with Lord Sugar giving voice to all these ghastly, horrible people.
Yes, though I think also there is an extent to which some of it obviously is being informed, I don't know how much or how little, by Dad's own experiences of work and engagement and flying a lot between the UK and the US and working with the different corporate cultures there. And a lot of it is going to be from the sort of popular consensus of business speak as it started to grow and develop. And so there's hints and ideas of that before it hits the bigger, more popular mainstream. But it's certainly something that's I think known if you're working in the kind of industries where those people are, even if you don't work with those people.
Yep, hypertextualizing in a to B, all
Yes.
that nonsense. Which to say to that. Now, something that I really liked the creation of Varactyl. I thought it was, and it's one of those names that, again, it's before I picked the book up, remembered Varactyl is the villain. And I love the fact that it can be hidden on a 700 megabyte CD. It's just one of those wonderful things. Maybe it was a Blu-ray in disguise. We just don't know that. Alien tech.
I much prefer the idea that it's only 700 megabytes big and this big a threat. Named very late in the day, none of the outlines have a name for Varactyl, and the last one just says, I'm calling it the creature. I will think of a better name for it. Although I think the Varatians are named by that stage of things. Varactyl is still waiting to see. But yeah, the sort of idea that the CD is the be-all and end-all of technology, and that, you know, the development of the CD is the point where everything changes is fascinating to look back at now, certainly. But also doesn't matter, because it's just about what the next big thing is. And any technological development and announcement, if we've just developed this exciting new thing of the last 30 years, could be the point when we could say, such a big fuss has been made out of this. Obviously, this will be the turning point wherein aliens think it's now ripe to invade, because we've finally developed the USB-C charging cable, or whatever it may be, that is now the turning point.
The commentary on the internet is also fascinating, given that I think there's a line that sort of like, people are using it for communicating and pornography. I just thought, how little did he know? It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I think it's just so insightful, and I suppose that's the thing. When you're working in that field, it does give you the insight and perhaps of an idea about maybe not what's going to happen 2 days down the line, but you've got a foot into tomorrow at least.
Yes, and I think a lot of what Dad was doing by the end of the time he was working at IBM, and I think this is, I don't think it's quite the last, but it's one of the last ones that he wrote before quitting the day job and going full-time with the writing. But part of his job was looking ahead 5 years, 10 years down the line and helping work and plan for what infrastructure needed to be in place to support the likely technological developments. But there's also the catch of having to write it for an audience who are not savvy in that way, which I think a lot of the ways in which it simplifies the internet or corporatizes the internet or points to technologies in a way that aren't what ended up happening are going to be to make it accessible to a layman reader who is not deep in the culture in 1995 of what 1998's computers will look like.
Yeah, I suppose this is days when we're sort of thinking this could well have been written on a Windows 95 machine, and yeah, would it have been? No, because it was written, probably within around that changeover, wouldn't it?
92 to 95, yeah.
That's quite scary.
And, I think if it's set about 1998, which is the year Google is introduced to the world, and obviously there's no way that seeing what Google will become is possible from there, but just in terms of the ways that it was fully impossible to see what the internet would evolve and look like, but also to get that idea across to people. I remember being sat down by my dad and taught how Google works in about 1998, 1999, and talked through, this is how you use it, this is what it's for, these are the ways to engage with a search engine, because he'd been using them on the corporate internal side of things, and now there was the sort of first mainstream, publicly accessible, popular equivalent.
Yeah. I remember using a thing called Web Crawler. That had been my search engine of choice for many years, sending out all the spiders, and then they were all coming back with all their finds and things like that. So, yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Was there anything else of note that sprung out at you when you were going through the papers?
There's one thing which I think is worth mentioning, which is in that final outline, so the one that eventually gets signed off and is the closest to the finished novel. As I said, by that point, everything is more or less in place and the new Varatian origins are there. There is one major difference to the very end of the book compared to what was published, which is that Sarah and Harry are married.
Wow.
In the final outline. when we see them with 1998 Sarah, which would have changed a lot of our understanding of how the book fits into and how Harry and Sarah's lives interact with each other in light of things like School Reunion and the Sarah Jane Adventures. And
that's fascinating. Wow, I did not see that coming.
I don't know when that got shot down or when he decided against it, whether that was a call that Peter Darvill Evans and Rebecca Levine made or whether that was a call he made and whose idea it was in the first place. But there's a version of this book where that's what we're left on.
Wow, because there's that line in the book where Sarah's wondering about what she's up to in 1998 and thinking, well, I have kids, I hope not, or something along those lines, or just like couldn't be bothered with the thought of them running around. So, but yeah, it's that is, wow, I did not expect that one. That is quite incredible, because I do love the fact that she's still got the pen. It's sort of like the sequel is potentially open there, but the sequel's a story for another day.
Yes, and then obviously Millennium Shock comes, and then that when Dad next hits we need a novel very, very quickly, while he's editing things at the BBC, and goes, what can I write to fill this gap? I can't ask Steve again.
Yes, well, we shall hopefully come to that one before too long in the near future, but that is amazing, Julian. Thank you so much for sharing all these thoughts and insights. They're fantastic.
Not at all. Always happy to talk about this kind of thing.
They're brilliant. Fantastic. We'll speak soon.
Thank you. Take care.
A huge thanks to Julian for taking the time to share that information with us. So, let's move on, because now we're going to have a second reading from the book, and again, this is courtesy of Craig Brawley. So, over to you, Mr. B.
I am Baractyl. I bring wisdom and freedom. The segmented metallic snake coiled and slithered on the screen in front of the Doctor. I bring life. Yes, so I believe, the Doctor said. But life, wisdom, and reason to the machine, at the expense of the organic, at the expense of humanity. The snake coiled into a figure of 8 metal scales, sliding over each other as its face closed on the front of the monitor, seeming ready to bump against the glass. You are not digital, it hissed. The Doctor leaned forward. No, I'm not. And that's a huge benefit, let me tell you. The snake circled away from the screen as if bored with the conversation already. Organic life is worthless, beyond reason. Not so, the Doctor shouted. Come back when I'm talking to you. You might learn something. The snake paused for a moment. Then the head reared and swiveled, curling back towards the Doctor. Organic life is fit only to serve, it hissed. You are vague, you are emotional, you are illogical. The human is imprecise and disorganized. The organic entity is easily distracted. Yet Stabfield and the Variations wish to enslave, not destroy organic life on this planet, the Doctor said quietly. Why is that, do you suppose? The snake's head swung across the monitor. An emotional response, it said after a while. The Variations have organic components. They too are impure. No, the Doctor shook his head. They, or rather their creator, realize the benefit of organic components. Varisha realized that the digital machine technology in itself is not enough. The machine is complementary to the organic, not vice versa. Explain, how can that be? The organic is disadvantaged. That depends on your definitions, the Doctor said. You describe the human being as vague, emotional, illogical, imprecise, disorganized, and distractible. Yes, I agree, the Doctor said. The snake stopped in mid-swing. Its head hung motionless as it waited for the Doctor to elaborate. But, the Doctor said eventually, another way of phrasing those same arguments is to say that humanity is creative, not vague or imprecise, resourceful, not emotional, adaptable to change, not distractible. The snake creature considered. What values do these things have? They have values you cannot appreciate or discern, since you are not organic. When did you ever feel for a friend or make an intuitive connection? When did you last enjoy a meal or watch a sunrise? When did you ever appreciate art or literature? You can learn from history, but you cannot appreciate it. You can observe and predict change, but you cannot adapt to circumstances. The snake coiled into a tight circle, looping round in itself endlessly, reflective scales blurring past the glass. And logic? It asked eventually, the flat metallic head appearing to be inches away from the Doctor's nose. Oh yes, said the Doctor, logic. He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. You take consistent decisions and actions based on logic. based on a quantitative evaluation of available variables free from their context, free from distraction. This is correct. But I am illogical, irrational, organic. I take decisions and act according to whim. I do what seems best at the time, based on my morals and my intuition. I take qualitative as well as quantitative data into account. I modify my behavior according to circumstance, according to context, according to experience. Then you are inconstant and inefficient, hissed Vractil. Maybe, the doctor replied. But consider this. My current objective is to persuade you of the veracity of my argument. I base my actions on an unjustified assumption that I can win that argument. Vractil hissed, perhaps in amusement, perhaps to accompany a calculation of probability. You have less than a 0.01% chance of success, it said. If you say so, the doctor conceded. But I can terminate this argument at any time. All I need to do is close the file that is you. There is no network connected to this machine, so you're trapped within the file, yes? Yes, Vractil agreed. But how does that help? Oh, it doesn't help you at all, the doctor said. You are digital, logical, constant. Next time I open your file, we can have the same argument again, and you will adopt a congruent position. Your argument won't change, no matter how many times we converse. Correct? But you have already agreed that I am irrational, illogical, and emotional. In my terms, I am adaptable and creative. I can and will vary my argument each time. So, the doctor said with a smile, according to your own probability calculation, we can have this conversation 1,000 times, and each time you will present the same viewpoint, the same evidence, the same argument. But once, just once, I will win, and I only have to win once. You may consider yourself superior, but you are trapped within a file structure I control. I lose and I close the file. I win and we proceed. And logic, your logic, dictates that I should eventually win. You cannot, on your own terms, be correct. The doctor's smile cracked into a broad grin. So there, he added, for good measure.
A massive thanks as ever to Craig for that. Now, let's have a look at the contemporary review from Doctor Who magazine. This appeared in issue 227, and the review was written by Dave Owen. Dave says, arriving in London in 1998, the Fourth Doctor and Sarah found that a new advance in the information revolution is about to take place, driven by a mysterious, powerful company called I2. While investigating, they renew their friendship with Harry Sullivan, now 20 years older than when they last met. What is stored on a stolen CD-ROM that makes it worth killing to retrieve? What will happen when the world superhighway goes online? Why do I2 employees find eating and drinking so repulsive? And how will the Doctor defeat an enemy that can survive within any kind of digital technology? The cover of Julian Richards' second novel, System Shock, ISBN 0426204445X, depicts a short-skirted Sarah toting a submachine gun. This accurately reflects the contents: lots of SAS sieges, surveillance devices and car bombs. But it's not just a pastiche of explosive spy series such as The Professionals or The New Avengers. The chief villain, a 43-year-old software tycoon, speaks with a buzzword-laden forked tongue, suspiciously like Gus Hedges of Channel 4's Drop the Dead Donkey. The funniest moment in the book is when he announces to a room half full of delegates that they are all hostages by displaying an overhead projector slide containing this information as a sequence of key points. By setting the book in 1998, about 20 years after Sarah's involvement with UNIT, Justin allows us to see today's gadgets through the eyes of someone who has never encountered a PC, fax machine or CD-ROM, which is just as well, because otherwise it might alienate those readers lucky enough never to have worked in a modern office. It also shows us an older Harry Sullivan, now an MI5 Assistant Chief of Staff. His role in the story would have been taken 20 years earlier by the Brigadier. Justin's description of what modern information technology can do is completely accurate, and his extrapolation of what might be just around the corner, with just a little help from an alien computer virus, seems quite reasonable. This makes System Shock just as unsettling in the 90s as Doomwatch was in the 70s. What begins as a mystery soon acquires enough action and momentum to make it viable as a lively action movie. It doesn't particularly evoke the styles of the Seeds of Doom or the Masque Mandragora, between which it's nominally set, but the characterisations of the regulars are fine. The Doctor whistles Colonel Bogey, Sarah infiltrates and investigates, and Harry still refers to her as an old thing, despite the fact that he's now 20 years her senior. Most readers with a nodding acquaintance with office technology will enjoy System Shock. Those who share my belief that the invention of the computer was both a blessing and a curse will love it. And I have to say, Dave's bang on there. Let's have a look at some contemporary reviews now and see what the readers have to say over on Goodreads. There it's got a rating of 3.31 from 184 ratings and 24 reviews. 5 stars 10%, 4 stars 31%, 3 stars 39%, 2 stars 15% and 1 star 2%. Let's have a look at some of these reviews. Here's a 5-star one from John Bullock. After the mediocre menagerie, System Shock is a return to form for the missing adventures. Whilst this is slightly longer than the majority in the Virgin range, it is quick-paced and Julian Richards' prose is a real joy to read. Chapter 2 sets the tone of the book beautifully. Sutcliffe's theft of the CD and the subsequent chase in his murder are written fantastically, creating a real sense of danger and suspense. The Voracians are interesting villains who have a great twist. The mystery of the inside man keeps you guessing right up until the reveal, with a few red herrings thrown in to keep you off the scent. Considering this is nearly 25 years old, the book still feels relevant. It could just as easily be based around the rollout of 5G. Justin may not have got his predictions of where the internet would be by 1998 anywhere near reality, but I don't think this distracts from the story. The combination of the Doctor, Sarah and an older Harry, for me, worked extremely well. Although considering the placement of this story, the Doctor here is a bit more like the later Fourth Doctor than the serious portrayal we saw in the Seeds of Doom. I'm really surprised to see such harsh reviews of System Shock. This is a great book. There's a 5-star review also from Chris. I was expecting too much from this one. Doctor Who doing a 90s techno-thriller and having an old Harry meet up with a young Doctor and Sarah seems like a recipe for a terrible and forgettable adventure. Yet it works really well for a few reasons. First off, the characters are good and enjoyable. The Fourth Doctor is slightly more like the Big Finish version, where he is a bit more toned down than the moody Doctor we have during Season 13. Secondly, with some distance, this works well as a historical novel about the 90s dot-com bubble. The villains being ultra-logical businessmen talking in nonsensical jargon is a great touch. Finally, Richards is one of the best writers, and at this point, he is able to show his skill at balancing action, character work, meaning, and fun. There's 4 stars from Mole Man. That's man with 2 N's. A pretty good spy-esque thriller novel. Doctor Who can do pretty good spy novels, as this novel and Trading Futures by Lance Parkin show. The Voracians are also very unique villains, probably based on the higher-ups and co-workers at Julian Richards' job. The technology references, though outdated, don't make me want to scream. Overall, pretty solid. There's a 3-star review here from Mestor. Watch it, Mestor! System Shock is a satisfactory, if overly long, Doctor Who novel. It considers themes still relevant today regarding the uses to which technology is applied, and the perennial debate of logic versus reason. It also functions as an interesting satire on office jargon and other appalling uses of the cliches of the workplace. The Fourth Doctor is generally well written throughout, and Julian Richards effortlessly captures Tom Baker's mannerisms and speech patterns in character. The main issue of the Doctor's involvement in the plot is that he spends an inordinate amount of time sitting at various computers, which does not make for very riveting reading. Sarah and Harry both come across less successfully, especially Sarah, who is uncharacteristically surly and trigger-happy. A key criticism of System Shock is that there are far too many characters, resulting in sketchy and often uninteresting characterisation. I'm also not entirely convinced by the way much of the book reads like an uncomfortable Doctor Who James Bond crossover. Nonetheless, not a bad Who novel, but far from being a classic. 2 stars from Seoki. The thing with near-future science fiction is that you need to be very sure of today's tech in order to extrapolate tomorrow's. This author wasn't. By 1995, when this book was released, PCs were already commonplace. There were already CD-ROM encyclopedias at the local library, and CD games were all the rage because they had better graphics. So following, it makes no sense that the author had no idea that to read a file list from a CD, you just had to pop it into the drive. I mention this because there is a significant part of the plot that involves people carrying a CD around without knowing what is inside it. It's actually plot, and it's just nonsense. Other kinds of nonsense. The catering plan. The fact that programming equals discussing philosophy with a piece of software. The fact that no one thought to pull the plug on the servers or cut energy to the house. The fact that the author was blissfully unaware of what a server is and what it does, and so also were his characters. The Hollywood hacking descriptions complete with 3D images of insects. The extremely precise IP locating within a building. The fact that the author had no idea what to do with Sarah Jane, so he just made her do nothing. So yeah, this one did not age well. So I think it's fair to say Seoki is not going to be rereading this one in a hurry, so probably won't be listening to this podcast. If on the other hand you have enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts from. We would really appreciate it because we haven't had any in ages. We're on social media too. You can follow us at Power of 3 Pod on Twitter. We're at Finished Zine on Blue Sky, and we have a Facebook group as well. So, we're going to leave you with a tune. And it only seems appropriate that, given that this is a book that's all about system shock, why don't we have some Kylie Minogue and Shocked? We'll see you very soon. Until then, I've been Kenny Smith. Bye bye.